Morning, this is Jo from Fine Country in SW Sussex, and today I'm talking to Bryan Mansell, who is the co-founder of Gazeal, a revolutionary company, like Bryan, a revolutionary company that's changing the way we buy and sell properties. Morning, Bryan, how are you doing?
Good morning. I'm feeling quite good being called a revolutionary, actually. It's sort of a very lofty ambition of mine, but yes.
Completely. Tell us about the service that you're offering and what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you and I have been working together now on this project of mine, I suppose. Yeah. I spent 30 years helping people move in all positions in agency, and I had the privilege of leading some very large agencies. But one of the things that has constantly struck me is there is no change in the process of buying. And all the years of doing it, people would always say it's one of the most stressful things. And when I looked into that, we thought, well, what could we do to try to help lower that stress, because it doesn't have to be a stressful thing as much. So I left agency, literally frontline agency, a couple of years ago and helped co-found Gazeal with two property solicitors, very high-level London property solicitors. And we looked at the process from the moment that you get a property that goes onto the market for the first time. And we looked at all the challenges why it takes so long, particularly when the lawyers get involved. And we looked at areas where we can tackle that. And we also looked at it from a technological point of view. How can we solve it with technology so the agents can actually help their customers? And so, we built a platform. It's called Gazeal. It's a tech platform, or prop tech as it's called. And essentially, it's for estate agents to use to help their customers do two fundamental things: get themselves ready to move. When a house goes onto the market, there is very little information normally available other than about the house itself, what people can see for a buyer. So we thought, when a buyer makes an offer on a property and it's accepted, of course, there's a lot of then detailed information that transfers between the two sets of lawyers. If we could bring that forward 3, 4, 6 weeks earlier, then of course that will be time saved later on. So we give the seller the opportunity to complete some their legal protocol forms, fixtures and fittings, key information about their house, key documents and guarantees they've had. And then obviously we make that available for estate agents to digitally send it to a buyer to have a look before they make an offer. So they get more educated.
Absolutely. So key documents, you mean anything that they've done on their windows, etc., the title plan, any covenants that might be on the property that might come up in the legals, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. So what we do is we first of all do a full title check to check that the property is registered with HMLN registry, and then we look at the title plan. So we get a copy of the register and a copy of the plan. The plan's the old map with the red drawing around it that everybody sees in their documentation. We get that very, very quickly. In fact, we can turn it around in 15 minutes on a property. And then the client, the seller, can do their fittings and fixtures form, which is called the TA10. And they can also do their property information form, which is a TA6. And these are the forms they're going to have to do no matter what, if they're going to move, obviously.
Absolutely. And part of the revolutionary way in which you're doing business now, Bryan, is to make the whole transaction more secure and more certain. So how do you do that?
Well, that part is the second part. So once you guys, the agents, have found a buyer for the property, we give the seller and the buyer the opportunity to make a commitment to each other, which has not really been done in the second-hand market before. It's done very often in new homes, and obviously it's done all the time in Scotland, and a lot of people refer to it that way. And all we simply say is, look, as long as there's more information available, once a buyer has become more educated because the seller's been transparent, then there should be a commitment. And typically, the owner of the house commits to the sale by taking their house off the market. Yeah, they do. And that's normally the request of the buyer, because the buyer is worried they might lose out. And what we're saying is, actually, the buyer should come off the market too. And so therefore, the process starts with a very fair, balanced, and a lot more trust at the very beginning. Yeah. So we offer a simple one-page reservation agreement that's already pre-written, pre-approved with the Law Society, and we simply digitize that. We issue that to seller and buyer. They both read through, they both sign the agreement. And at that point, then if either one of them, before they exchange contracts, breaks that agreement they've made to each other, there is a penalty involved.
Okay. And there are some caveats on that, aren't there? Job loss, there's a sinkhole in the back garden, the house is just about to fall into it, that kind of thing?
That would probably be reasonable, yeah. Of course, as you can understand, if we wrote every possible scenario that somebody might not be their fault, that they could come away from it, then we'd have a 1,000-page document. No one would ever read it. So we make some key provisions in the agreement, because obviously, look, we understand, and I do particularly from being in the industry so long, that many things can happen that are not the fault of the seller or the buyer. And basically, if something does happen that is not the fault of either individual party, and they then cannot sell the property or buy the property, then look, no, there's no penalty there as long as it can be proven.
Yeah, and we just go back to what you said about the seller comes off the market because the buyer feels confident. Even if we are no longer selling a property to the buyer, Rightmove will, if we put on any new property, Rightmove will sell our properties to our buyer of another property. So we're asking people to just actually put their money where their mouth is and say, yeah, I commit to this in a reservation agreement. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you make a good point. I think many sellers, when they get to the point where a buyer agrees, a lot of the time it's in good faith at that time. They're in a reasonably good relationship because, of course, the investigative period hasn't started yet, or the diligence period hasn't started. But what most sellers don't realize is, even if a buyer says, I'm coming off the market, I'm as good as my word, which they do, and the agency such as Fine Country that's arranged the sale clearly is not going to try to scupper the deal by continually talking to the buyer. The buyer will be receiving alerts on a daily basis, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day, for 2 things that happen. And the only 2 things that they get sent information on is a price reduction or a brand new instruction coming to the market. So a house that's been reduced, or a new one that comes to the market. And of course, over a period of 2 or 3 months, they're getting 60, 70, 80 of these. And what it's like a habit of doing is it begins to make people think, well, maybe the market is falling because all I'm seeing is properties reducing. Am I paying too much for this house? I know what I'll do. I'll try and lower my price. Or they simply do find something else they prefer and walk away. And that's when our agreement stops happening. Okay? If they decide to go and do that and walk away, they will have to pay a penalty. And that penalty then goes to the seller.
Yeah, fair enough. That covers the cost. I totally agree. I think the way Scotland do it is much better, much more secure, so you can breathe out, because in this country you can't actually breathe out until it's the point of exchange, and even 5 minutes before exchange you can still,
you think of it this way, okay? So this is for me, the way that I get my head around it. In the UK, in the second-hand property market, if you agree to buy a house and you have, let's say you have 3 house sales, one of those will not make it. And the estate agent is very limited in terms of what they can really identify, what they can really verify at the point an offer is made, because we're quite limited in what we can do. So it's not until much later that the mortgage is involved and the surveyors are involved and the solicitors are involved and everybody else, then the truth can come out. And what we found by asking for a reservation fee, a very small one, starting at £250 at the point that the offer is made, it kind of does 2 things. It proves that there's a commitment from the buyer, because they're not committed to £250, they're committed to £2,000, but they only pay £250 because we cover the rest. But more importantly, if there's anything they've told us or told the agent that turns out not to be true, then they could face a penalty later on. And there is nothing else like this in the market right now. And we've seen now over 100 times this year the effects of that has been very positive.
Great. So there are some impending regulations that are coming along. Would you like to just explain what they are and what the change it'll be in the UK?
Yeah, of course. Well, there's what's called the ROPA report, which is Regulations of Property Agents report, that's been now published. The results have been published. Recommendations to the government via the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, who are essentially in control of the property market in the UK on behalf of whichever government is sitting. The recommendations to regulate a state agency, essentially, to have one regulator that literally covers all activities that agents get involved in, much like you do with solicitors and you do with mortgage brokers and so on. It's bringing that final piece of jigsaw to be put in. They just literally in the last week published the 14 what they call codes of conduct that will go to the regulator. One of those codes of conduct, amongst which is I think a really standout one, is that they're asking, or they're going to be put forward to government, that estate agents must mandate the use of what is called the How to Sell Guide, or the how-to guides.
Okay.
Currently, the only how-to guide, and this is a government-published guide,
Yeah.
that is in force legally, is the how to rent guide, which must be given to a tenant before they take up residence in a property.
Yeah. But we haven't got any how to buy guides.
But there is a how to sell guide, a how to buy guide, and a how to rent guide that are not mandated.
Okay.
And the suggestion is that they do become mandated. Now, I'll fast forward. The how to sell guide should be given to every single seller at first contact. And that guide very clearly says to the sellers, before you get viewings on your property, go on the market essentially, you should collate all of the key paperwork about your home, such as your fixtures and fittings forms and all the documents and guarantees and planning permissions and covenants, as you mentioned earlier, and have it ready and available the moment that the sale starts for people to inspect. Because, of course, they're going to have to do that anyway. It's just that it's much later on typically, and that's what tends to scupper deals.
Yeah.
So obviously what we've done, and we're very, very pleased the government have done this, is that we provide the technology to the owners to do this free of charge, by the way, irrespective of whether they've got a lawyer or not, and get it done at the very beginning. But most importantly, it's then available to be viewed by buyer in a secure environment. So there's no personal information shared, just the forms and the documentation that the seller has collated. Everyone is more educated. It's a much better process. And people and buyers can be, can make an offer with a great deal more education.
Yeah.
Sellers can accept that as being a bit more reliable, perhaps.
Absolutely. And also that'll quicken the process of between getting to exchange, because quite often you get the fact that all these forms are completely overwhelming at point of offer being accepted, and they've got to fill them in. And if they're not filled in, then the solicitors can't get on with their work either. So getting to exchange takes a little bit longer, and that's in England. That's the bit we all go, oh yeah, we've done it. So,
You're so right. I mean, because I think people haven't moved don't move very often these days now. I think on average about 20 odd years. And so, of course, when this, typically they put their house in the market, you guys get the viewings, we get an offer. We then choose a solicitor. The solicitor sends us terms of business, which we have to sign, and then 20 pages of documents, which we've got to do. And everybody looks at that and goes, oh, my God, I don't know where that document is or what that document is. So they have to go and do that. And that takes 4 or 5 days, maybe a week sometimes, to get that together. And that's then it goes back to their solicitor, then on to the next solicitor, and so on and so on. And oh, my God, it just takes so long.
So you're offering
the first week. So it's all done out the way in the first time.
Perfect. And then that all goes to the solicitor and everybody's
straight to the solicitor. And the important thing is the solicitor, whoever they are, then doesn't have to do it again.
Yeah.
So it's all done first time. So that's just great.
Great. Thank you, Bryan. That's great. So we at Fine Country are using Gazeal. We're recommending you use it right at the very beginning. So if anybody wants to contact you, they have to come through me. But there is a website, isn't there? What's your website?
Yeah, website is just gazeal.co.uk. Gazeal. It's a verb for gazealing the deal, or not getting gazumped.
Okay.
Gazeal, that's what everybody asks. We get called gazelle all the time. I don't know why. So it's gazeal.co.uk. Yeah.
Okay, so if you want that explained a bit more before you come on the market, have a look there. Bryan, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for explaining it. I think the service you're offering is amazing. I think it's really timely and well needed in the UK, or in England anyway, because I've got it in Scotland. Okay, Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Talking to you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.